So we really like the Green Valley News. We also work very closely with our commissioned officers, our deputy sergeants and lieutenant we have. Because when a deputy goes out on a call and he has to take a report from somebody that's lost $2,800 or $10,000, he realizes that could be his grandmother, you know, and it just ticks them off. So they are really on board with everything we're doing. And people call them scams. But the guys that are doing that, I just call sleazeballs, scuzzballs, slimeballs, because that is what they are. They are criminals. And they go after your emotions. This has nothing to do with your intelligence. These guys are con artists, and they call them artists for a reason, because they know exactly what to say. They have the answers. They know the psychology. They know how to work it. We had a guy that we went out to the other day, actually my neighbor, and he had received a call from his grandson in Mexico. Grandpa, I'm here for a wedding, and I got caught drunk driving, and if you don't send me $2,800 right now, you know, they're going to throw me in jail, and I'll be in jail for 2 weeks before I can even come up for a hearing. Please don't tell my parents, don't call the cops, but go down to CVS, get a green dot card. Are you all familiar with green dot cards? No. They are like a credit card that you can load. You can go to green, to CVS. This man went down and got $2,800, loaded it on a green dot card. When he came back, his grandson called him again and he said, okay, now scratch off the numbers. It's like scratching off lottery numbers. You scratch off those numbers and tell me what they are. And what that did is that man now has $2,800. Well, and the next morning, he got another call, and it was from the U.S. Embassy in Mexico. And they were letting him know that he had to send another $2,000 because his grandson was in trouble, and he was going to be murdered if they didn't do it. And that, I just think that's evil, to do that to somebody. And he was so frightened, and he went to the bank, and the banker said, have you called your grandson? And he said, no, it's too dangerous, I'm not going to call him. They told me if I called the family, if I called the cops, if I called the FBI, they'd murder him. And he was, you know, he was really frightened, and he got the money, went down and got another CVS card, and did it. And the only reason we know about it is because the banker called us. He was still too afraid. So that's how these guys work. Now, this is what the sergeant told me one day. If somebody breaks into your house, and they steal your computer, your jewelry, your TV, maybe they'll steal your car, you're going to go and you're going to make a police report on that. And you have a possibility of some of that property being returned to you. If not, your insurance company is going to pay for part of that. When you lose money to one of these scammers, it's gone. It's out of the country. It's wired overseas. It's gone. So if you lose money, you've lost it. So please be aware of that. The first recorded scam I could find was in 1588. So these slime balls have been around a long time. And the story was on the scam that it was a man that was locked up in the dungeon of the king's castle. And this man knew where the treasure was hidden, but he wouldn't tell the king. So if you would just send him a little money, then he could bribe the guard, and he would get out of the dungeon and share the treasure with you. There you go. I don't know how he sent that message, maybe by a pigeon with a little note, I don't know. But that's the start of it. So they've been going for a long time.
I'll have a hamburger, for which I will gladly pay you Tuesday.
Remember that old saying, if it's too good to be true, it probably is? Just keep that in mind. One of the first cases that I went out on happened on, she came into the sheriff's office. And when you come into the sheriff's office, one of our volunteers sits at the front desk. And this lady came in and she wanted to know where the VIN number on a Mercedes-Benz was. Because she had won the Publishers Clearinghouse. She had won $950,000 in a cashier's check. and it was supposedly from Wells Fargo Bank. So she had gone to Wells Fargo Bank and asked them, how long would it take to make sure the check was good if it was drawn on their bank? And they said, about an hour. So now she's coming over to the sheriff's office to see where the VIN number on a Mercedes was to make sure it wasn't a hot car. So now she's thinking. And Sandy's sitting at the front desk going, boy, you be careful because this sure sounds like a scam. We've got a lot of scams going around right now, and this sure sounds like a scam. And she said, nope, I'm sure this is not a scam. I feel really good about it. She said, I've talked to these guys, and she said, I'm from New Jersey, and I know a scammer when I see one. And they haven't shown any behavior at all that it's like a scam. So the sergeant poked her head around the corner and said, what's going on? And this sergeant has really been helping me a lot with this. And she said, you tell me that story. So she told the sergeant this story. Sergeant said, now you be careful because it sure sounds like a scam. Oh, no, she said, I've been praying about it and I feel real good about it. So the sergeant shot me an email, and the next day I was on duty, I was on patrol. So when we got done patrolling, it happened to be the 4th of July. And that's when this lady was supposed to get the check in the car. So I said, let's go see her. So we did. I walked up, she let me in, and I gave her these 2 pieces of information, told her what we were doing. And she told me about what was happening to her and all of this information, and she was just sure this was good. They couldn't show up today because they couldn't make it through the ports because the ports were closed today. Well, they always have an answer. But I did get it out of her that she'd already given them $1,000. So when I got ready to leave, I said, you've got to promise me. I just pointed my finger right in her eye, and I said, you've got to promise me you won't give them any more money. And she looked at me and she said, okay, I won't give them any more money. And when I left, I walked out the door, and the sergeant had come, and she was walking up the driveway, and we both turned around, and this lady was looking at us. Her door was open, and she was looking at both of us, and she kind of cocked her head like this, and she said, wow, you guys are serious, aren't you? I said, yeah, we're serious. So the next day, the sergeant called me about 3 o'clock in the afternoon. She said, you heard anything, Lou? I said, haven't heard anything. So I called this lady about 5 o'clock, and I said, well, I didn't get any donuts. And she said, well, they called about 9 o'clock, and they wanted $10,000. And I told them I didn't have $10,000. And they said, well, how much do you have? And she said, I just thought I'd play with them. Well, I can give you $100. And the guy said, my manager's going to be really ticked off at me. He's going to be really ticked off. I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. I've spent all this time with you, and I'm going to be in a lot of trouble. And he was angry. He was mad. He was pressing. And she hung up because she realized it was a scam. And she said, I felt so bad because I had things I was going to do with that money. I was going to help so many people. I was going to help my kids. I was going to give some here and all these different places. And I told her, I said, you know what? You're going to help people because I'm going to tell your story. And maybe somebody won't get caught on this Publishers Clearinghouse scam. Publishers Clearinghouse will not call you and let you know that you won. They show up at your front door hoping you are just got out of bed with your hair and rollers with no makeup and a houseboat so they can spread that photo all over. So they do not. You do not. Please remember that. These people, I call them they're really great with emotions. And they know how to get to your emotional jugular vein. And that's what they're looking at. I want you to know this has nothing to do with intelligence. Because when they grab a hold of your heart and threaten you with grandkids or threaten you with something else, all reason, logic, intelligence goes right out the window. It's gone. And they pressure you to do it fast. They pressure. They don't want you even thinking. Because if you thought, you might not come up with the money. So that's why they pressure you so fast. As we age, our social filters diminish. For some of us to tell who's telling the truth and who's lying, who's going to help us, who's going to harm us. In the past, we've been able to control those urges that we wanted to spend money on the lottery, or we wanted to spend money here. As we age, sometimes that control lessens, and so we're more vulnerable to these scams. And it's like our decision making. It's harder for us to make quick decisions, and that's why they pressure us. They know. They're smart. That's why they come to Green Valley. I have a banker. She's still a banker, and she's the manager of a bank. She works with scams every day. And it was the weekend. It was Saturday. She had her grandkids at her house. They were trying to get their coats on, their backpacks, get them in the car because they were going to a meeting someplace, and her phone rang. This is Chase Bank, Fraud Security Division. I'm checking to see if you just made a $465 purchase on your credit card. She said, no, I didn't. Well, he said, we'll credit that back to you because we've been following this company and we're pretty sure it's a fraudulent company. And he said, my badge number is blah, 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 blah. Here's the 800 number to call in case you have any questions. He said, I want to make sure that you have 2 cards in your possession. She said, hold on. So she went to her purse, she got her card. She asked her husband if he had his. Yes, he had his. And she told, yeah, we got them both. And he said, great. Now, just for confirmation, I want you to tell me the security number on the back. She did. She did. And you know what? The minute she did that, she hung it up. She called Chase Bank because she knew it was a scam. But they caught her at the right time. She wasn't thinking. She was in a hurry to get those kids in the car and get to that meeting. She just wasn't thinking. So another example is we had a retired SAV member. And he got a phone call from Maine. And it was an attorney who said, I've got your son here. If you send $2,800, he's been picked up for drunk driving. He needs $2,800 for bail, or else he's going to have to go to jail for 2 weeks before he can get to court. Send it right now. Go get $2,800, get home in an hour, and I'll call and tell you what to do with the money. He did. He went right to the bank, got the money, went home. They called him, told him where to wire it, and he did. And when he got home, he thought, that's kind of weird because my son lives in Florida. Well, he could have been on vacation in Maine. I don't know. He could do that. But then he got a call the next morning, and they needed more money. It was the same attorney, and he just hung it up. But that's where they get your emotions. So anybody is vulnerable to this. And every time I give a talk or go talk to people, somebody will say, well, how could people be so stupid? How could they just be so stupid? It has nothing to do with being stupid. They just catch you at the right time. If you have a telephone in your house, if you have a computer, if you get the U.S. mail, you're a target. So I think everybody in here probably gets the mail. So you're all targets. We are all targets. These guys are good. And one of the first calls I went out on was a lady who, she said, her husband had just died 8 months before. And it was some tax things. And she said, I don't know, he did all the tax. We didn't have an accountant. And she said, I'm not sure. And it turned out to be a scam, so it was a good thing she called. But it kind of chopped into my head. She was a widow. And the more I went out and visited people, the more I realized, wow, there's a lot of widows that they're getting. And then when I went to see a man one time, he said, ever since my wife died a year ago, my computer, my telephone, the mail, I've just been inundated with these scams. And finally I put it together. It's widows and widowers. Well, who's more vulnerable? Who's more vulnerable? I mean, your emotions are going up and down. You feel isolated. Your life has changed. And then I thought, well, how do they know that? Well, obituaries. Mm-hmm. These scuzzballs are sitting in Kiev, Ukraine, reading the Green Valley News obituaries online. Isn't that something? And then I thought, well, When my dad passed away, my mother put his obituary in 2 different newspapers, and she didn't get those calls. She doesn't live in a retirement town. We live in a retirement town. They are specifically targeting our area codes and our zip codes. So they're after us, and they know we don't live in mud huts. You know, that we probably have a little in the bank that they can take, and they will. So please be aware of that. And think of all the information in those obituaries. It's got your spouse, where you grew up, where you went to college, a lot of it, your work, your kids, your grandkids, and what they'll do with those. They'll get in, if your grandkids are on Facebook, they'll pull this piece of information and that piece of information and this piece of information, and then they'll put it together. And then they've got a story that is believable about you. So beware what you put out there. And your grandkids, you know, they need to be aware too what they're putting out. So these are our 3 action items.